You know, when I learned to program, you would learn a language to get an idea. You know, if someone had an idea how a computer should be used, they would invent a language to express that idea. And I think this was when you know, suddenly became easy to make languages when they first made compilers, parser generators, and so forth. So I got used to learning languages, and to the point.
How many languages do you know?
I don't know, probably 100,
Really?
200. I don't know. I mean, some of them are pretty tiny languages, but most of them are pretty bad, because sometimes you just want to be able to do a simple mathematical formula, and if the people were worried about mathematical formulas, they would forget to put that into their language, and so it was often pretty tough. And that's why I fell in love with objects, because what objects does is it says, you know, what's not important is the syntax or how you do, you know, mathematical formulas. What's important is that there's a concept, and that concept has a border around it, that there's messages that, you know, if you have an instance of that, you can say, you know, here's the thing, this is what I want it to do. Every object sort of has a mini language around it. And I saw, I don't need to learn new languages anymore. And I stopped learning languages. Now the one I happened to fall into was Smalltalk, and Smalltalk was very clean and simple. It was an early object-oriented language. It was a pure object-oriented language, which meant they pushed objects to the limit. It was simplifying, as we were just talking about a minute ago. They made it very simple because they said this is the most important idea and everything else is secondary. So it was great for learning it. I loved pushing this idea of every object is a miniature language. I become a language designer when I design an object. But I'm a language designer that's designing a small language that fits in with all these other languages. Now, I've gotten so much in my life by trying to find objects, designing those languages, developing the systems. The computer essentially teaches me what I need to know about a subject as I'm making those languages and making them work together. You know, I go to a conference, I meet somebody, I say, you know, they're telling me about some cool project. I say, well, what did you learn from the computer that you didn't expect to learn? And people are surprised, you know, but the fact is you can learn. I mean, the computer teaches you something in the course of programming. And they say, well, that's an interesting question, and they tell me something amazing. You know, well, that's the secret question. You know, what did you learn from your computer that you didn't expect to learn? And that's how a computer teaches you things. Now,
can you give me an example? Something you learned from a computer?
Something. Well, I learned, the first commercial software I developed when I left research was a thing that connected bond trading with the accounting that goes with it. And a trader cares about one thing, and the people in the back office care about, you know, what happens after that. And they had this notion of end of day. You know, they say, well, at the end of day, well, first of all, you know, scientific background, I think of time as continuous, you know, and, you know, from 1 minute to the next, the fact that the sun goes around, or the moon, Earth goes around the sun, or whatever it does. I guess it's the Earth turning that causes days, you know, but you know, but it turns out in business, you know, there really is the notion of a day is more fundamental than a minute. And people would talk about end of day, and we had these two communities that would talk about what happens at the end of day. And it wasn't until we wrote the program that we discovered that they were talking about a different time. That one person's end of day was not the same as the other. Now, I believe that these people were talking to each other for years, and they didn't know that they weren't talking about the same thing. But when we wrote the programs and made them come out to the penny, when we had things that varied from day to day, we would find errors in pennies. And, you know, of course, somebody's reaction was, well, you know, that must be some round off. But it wasn't a round off. It was because one person, when they said end of day, meant end of day up to the point that you accrue tomorrow's interest. And the other person meant end of day right after you account for the accrued interest. Now, if the interest is the same, of course, it wouldn't make a difference. But when there's changing interest, it's pennies. And these people, you know, they thought they knew what the words meant. Then we'd get into it, we're trying to debug this, and they're saying, well, 11:59 on Wednesday, 12:01. Well, that doesn't help, because that, you know, minutes don't matter. You know, it's this abstraction about, you know, we trade our bonds, and then at the end of the day, we accrue our interest.